All right, so let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. The Georgia Department of Education and the Georgia Career Information Center have partnered together to provide access to the Georgia Career Information System, or GCIS as some of you know it as, and the administration tools for every public middle school and high school in the state of Georgia. As the new high school site administrator, you'll have an opportunity to use GCIS to support your career advisement efforts at your high school. And during today's presentation, we will define the various types of GCIS users. We will explore GCIS's basic website platform, and we'll learn about the high school advisement milestones, how to save and retrieve content, and also take a look at the personal learning plan, which will be a very integral part of your ongoing and annual advisement with your students. And so I'm going to remove this window that has Microsoft Word document that has our information on it and take you to the actual website. To access the Georgia Career Information System, you actually have to go to the GCIS website, and our URL is www.gcic.peachnet.edu. And when you enter that URL, that will bring you to the Georgia Career Information Center's homepage. And on our particular homepage, we have a wealth of resources that you can use in order to orient yourself in terms of how to navigate through the various items. And the number one questions I've been receiving today are, what are the milestone requirements for my school? And I want to give those to you verbally up front. What are those requirements? Your ninth grade students, in terms of the Georgia Department of Education's career advisement milestones, are ninth graders have to explore 3 additional occupations. 10th graders have to learn about Move On When Ready. 11th graders have to save 3 post-secondary schools. And 12th graders have to talk about, after you get all this wonderful information, what are your next steps. And I will be sure to send you a walkthrough guide at the conclusion of our session. And so if you wanted to see that information on our homepage from the Georgia Career Information Center's page, you would go to the section called Help Yourself. And when you go to Help Yourself, you will click on Georgia's Bridge Act. And on this page, you'll see a whole wealth of resources that will orient you to the various components. And what we have earmarked for you that I think you'll really enjoy are what are called the Bridge Law Step-by-Step handouts. So if you were to arrive at this page, you would scroll down and you would see under the Bridge Law Step-by-Step handouts that there are in fact documents that require you to implement this information. And I have a comment that says the bill says that ninth graders are to participate in Move On When Ready. That is exactly correct. You can also start introducing Move On When Ready prior to the 10th grade. And as you guys also know, you will have an opportunity to engage in that annual and ongoing career advisement throughout that student's entire matriculation through high school. So thank you so much for including that viewer 502. Very helpful. And again, please make sure that you're using the chat bubble, because this is also a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for you to interface with your colleagues that are around the state. So definitely feel free to incorporate that. And someone was asking about the toolbar. I think if you hover up at the very top, it should appear. So you will have instructions for your ninth graders saving 3 occupations. 10th grade, you'll see that that is not a link, as we allow you to decide how you want to introduce Move On When Ready. 11th graders will save 3 post-secondary schools, and 12th graders will click on their next steps. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of the information that is available in our system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to click on Home, and that will return me to the Georgia Career Information Center's homepage. If you look on the left-hand side of your screen, you have 2 icons that say click here to enter Georgia Career Information System, and then you have click here to enter Georgia Career Information System Junior. No matter which of those elements that your students click on, it will take you to a login page where your students can enter into the system. So I'm going to click on click here to enter Georgia Career Information System, and it will take me to a screen that will ask for a username and a password. Now, there are actually 4 types of usernames and password sets that would allow you to look at the GCIS content. The first is called your school access username and password. The school username and password is unique to each and every school. Every school in the state of Georgia has one. And we actually shared that information shared an email with every principal in the state on July 28th that denoted how you could contact us and tell us who your site coordinator is. So if you are the site coordinator and your principal has sent us an email, you should have received your school's username and password. If you are not sure if you're the site coordinator or not quite sure if your principal has received that email and responded, we're more than happy to send that email back out again to the appropriate person. So if either is the case, please feel free to shoot us an email at GCIScoordinator@GSU, and we will make sure that we send that information out again, because that includes your first steps on how to get started with implementing GCIS at your site. The school username and password would allow for general exploration. So your students would be able to see all of the assessments, they would be able to see the post-secondary schools, they can see the occupations, military occupations, course planner, all the bells and whistles they would have access to see. And that's actually where the information stops. You can explore that information all day long. What we recommend is that you actually create what are called portfolios. And portfolios are specific to each of your students. There are 3 ways in which portfolios are established. 1, your students can actually go into the system and create their own portfolio after having entered the school access username and password. 2, if you are the site administrator, you can actually upload portfolios for your students. The 3rd way is you can contact the Georgia Career Information Center, and we can assist with uploading your students' portfolios. If you would like to either create them yourselves as a site coordinator, or you would like for GCIC to complete them, we actually have a spreadsheet that I'm going to show you real quick that you would just include the information on. And so if you are uploading this information, you can actually copy the information from your SIS and drop it into this spreadsheet. On this spreadsheet, you'll see that there are a series of both green and yellow columns. The green columns are required, so username, password, first name, and last name are required. It is highly recommended that you include a graduation year, because when you start to run reports on your students, it will be based on their graduation year in terms of the milestone requirements. If you send the information to us, you do not necessarily have to put it in this format. I usually take the information and I can actually take it from an Excel spreadsheet. I can take that information from a PDF and actually work my magic and put it together in this particular format. So if you do decide to send your information for us to create it, we would need each one of your students' first names. We would need those students' last name. You would need to include that student's graduation year. The next things that we would also need is we would need to know how you want your username to appear and how you want your password to appear. So for your username, a username has to be 6 characters. And those 6 characters have to be unique within our system. So some school districts are electing to use a lunch ID. Some are electing to use a school district username, a school district number that is related to the student. Some are using GTID. Others have actually started becoming very creative and linking the last name with a lunch number if the lunch number is shorter. Okay. So whatever you can think of, we can go ahead and implement that as long as it's not taken by another student. So again, these are different examples of usernames. So lunch ID, student ID, GTID, last name and lunch ID, or whatever it is that you decide to come up with. You would also tell us how you would want your password to appear. A password has to have 8 characters. At least one has to be a capital letter. At least one has to be a lowercase letter. And at least one has to be a number. So 1 capital, 1 lowercase, and 1 number. Some are electing to use the same password for all students. Some are electing to use mascot plus a number. So since I'm at Georgia State, we're Panthers. And you can do it with the graduation year if you want to. Some are electing, I saw a really unique one recently where it's the capital first initial, lowercase last initial, and birth date. If I were 12, 31st, 98. Whatever it is that you want to do. So as long as it meets those requirements, I have my capital letter, lowercase letter, and at least 1 number, and it meets the 8 character requirements, you can use that information. So you just tell us what your desire is, and we'll go ahead and implement that for your students. And this is very useful if you have students that are transient within your school district. You can actually use this same setup to make sure that you don't have to spend additional time trying to create a username for your students or a new setup for them. Okay. All right, so if this is something that you'd like to for GCIC to do, again, you can send us a spreadsheet to GCIS Coordinator@gsu.edu. This particular spreadsheet is located inside of the administration tools. And so right now we do have several that are in our queue, so we try to get them back to you as quickly as possible. All right, so I'm going to minimize that. The third way that a person can get into the GCIS is through what is called visitor access. And a student can elect to allow someone to have temporary access to specified content within his or her portfolio. And so a visitor can be someone like a mentor, an admissions counselor. It can be a teachers as advisors. It could be a fellow counselor or just a big brother or sister, and the student just wants to have information or feedback from that individual to, again, supplement their annual and ongoing advisement. And the last type of GCIS user that can access the system would be what is called parental access. You as a site administrator can attach a parent's account to a student's account so that mom, dad, or guardian can actually share information between you and that student, as well as kind of have that three-way communication, if you will. So mom and dad can contact you, mom and dad can contact the student, you can contact the student. So again, engage in that annual and ongoing career development feedback paradigm to ensure that everyone has the same information. So all very great ways to, again, leverage the GCIS platform. For the interest of today's system presentation, I'm actually going to log into my student's account. And I'm going to click Sign In. And then this is the basic interface of what your students will have access to when they log into the Georgia Career Information System, or GCIS. And I'll talk about some of the items that are on this page. So you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner that it says Georgia Career Information System, our logo. And this will become very important to you as you're navigating through the system, as this is one of the features that would allow you to come back to this home page after you have explored various modules within the system. Over on your right-hand side, you will notice the name of your school once you actually log in, and the name of my school happens to be Sample School. I will also notice that since I'm logged in as a student, my name will appear at the very upper part of the screen, as well as be duplicated a little bit lower. So you'll see my student's name is Cindy. And when I hover over my name, I actually have a little drop-down arrow that would allow me to complete a series of functions within the GCIS platform. The first thing I can do is view my portfolio to see the portfolio landing page, where I can actually explore information I've saved previously. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And so that would bring me to the My Portfolio dashboard. And I'll have a series of questions that would allow me to look at specific elements within my portfolio. So I have, where are the pages and results that I've saved? So within this particular subsection, I can see my favorite items, which would be like my favorite occupations, favorite programs to study, favorite post-secondary schools. I can see my sort and assessment results that are available. So if I've saved the career cluster inventory, I've saved reality check, I can revisit that information. Or if I've stored files and links, such as I've uploaded a resume, letter of reference, recommendation letter, I have all of that information, again, stored under where are the pages and the results that I've saved. I also can, if I want to see more information about that, I have an opportunity to click on Expand Overview of this area, or I can click on the little corresponding plus sign. So just as a demonstration, I'll click on the plus sign. So under my favorite items that I've saved individually, I have 4 career profiles. I have 8 financial aid scholarships that I've saved, and by the way, GCIS has $10 billion worth of financial aid within it. I've saved 3 post-secondary schools, and these schools will count towards my 11th grade career advisement milestone, which stipulates I have to save 3 post-secondary schools. And I'll drop down to where I have occupations. It says that I have 79 saved occupations and clusters. This would add to my 9th grade requirement, which stipulates I have to have 3 additional occupations. Notice the word additional, because the students should have saved 3 occupations in their 8th grade. So you will append to what that student has done previously. So I'm just going to close that back up. And I'm going to go back up to my name in the far upper right-hand corner. And please notice that I'm actually navigating to other parts of the system without having left the first section. The next thing that I can do when I hover over my name is I can share my portfolio. and this is related to the visitor, which was the third type of user who has access to the system. So to create a visitor's temporary access, I can click on Go to Visitors or the corresponding icon. And you'll see that I already have a visitor who is assigned to view my portfolio. So visitor, last name to my portfolio, has access through the 10th and can actually look at various items. If I wanted to add a second person, I would click on Add Visitor, and I would implement a username. I would implement a password. I would enter my person's first name, person's last name, and if I know that person's email address, which would be very helpful because we'll send an email automatically to that person, I get to establish how long that person has to view my information, and I would click on Add. And when I click Add, I get to earmark the specific portions of my portfolio that I would like for that person to provide commentary. So I may want them to just look at my uploaded resumes. And so I would go down to Update View. And so now Portfolio Viewer has access through the 12th of September. And I've sent a username and password to that person. And when that person has concluded their viewing of my system, they can actually comment on it, and I can interface back and forth with them. I'm going to go back up to my name, and I'm going to click on Print My Portfolio. This is a very useful resource, again, when you're doing that ongoing advisement, as this is a wrap-up report of everything it is that this student would have ever saved within their portfolio. So you can use this information to help them make future decisions about their careers as well as their post-secondary education. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on Select All Topics, and this student has been in here for quite some time, so she has quite a bit of information. And I can actually go through and cherry-pick various items as well. But for today's presentation, I'll click on Select All. I'll click Print Selected Items. And this is what would be included on this complete portfolio layout. So this student, the last time I printed this information out, it was 27 pages of data. So if you ever needed to go back and refresh your mind on what that student has done, you have the opportunity to see this information. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the X in the upper right-hand corner, as I do not want to print 27 pages right now. But again, this would be a great opportunity, that print feature, for you to share with mom and dad during that parent-student-teacher conference. The next thing that I can do, which is more cutesy, is I can edit my image. So if you look in the far upper right-hand corner, you'll see that I have a little avatar. And to show you a clearer view of it, let me go ahead and click on the house on the far left-hand corner. That is the second way that you can get back to the very first page. And so you'll see a duplication of my name and my image. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my icon, and I can show how I'm feeling today. So today, I think I am very cool. So I now have selected my little icon. And the last thing that I can do when I hover over my name at the very far corner of the screen is I can look at my account settings. And this is a very important resource, as your students can change some of their information. So your students have the opportunity to edit their first name, middle name, and last name. They can change their email address. They can adjust their graduation year. Let's say a student has forgotten or would like to implement a new password. They can actually do that feature from here. So enter a new password. Your students also have an opportunity to select questions for security, as well as to provide answers. So let's say that the student couldn't remember his or her password. On that same screen where we logged in initially where it asked for a username and password, immediately below that, it provided an opportunity for you to click on Forgot Username and Password. And should that be the case, your students can enter their email address or respond to a series of security questions, i.e. these two, and it will automatically send a new temporary password to that student in that email address that he or she has earmarked. If the student does not enter an email address and can't respond to the questions, you as the site coordinator have the opportunity to reset it through the administration tools. And so I would definitely encourage you guys to sign up to part 2 of this session, which would be administration tools for new high school site administrators, which I believe will be held on Thursday, September 22nd at the very same time as today's presentation. So if you're not signed up for that, I would encourage you to do so. Okay. Your students can also change the information that is available for you as a site administrator to see. So I can say, yes, my school counselor advisor can view my portfolio, and that would allow you as the administrator the right to see everything that is within there. The student can also say, no, I do not want to have anyone to have permission to look at my portfolio, and you would have limited access to see information within. Now, again, as a site administrator, you can actually turn this feature on or off in the administration tools so that everyone has to say yes or everyone has the opportunity to decide. So completely up to you. The last element that is very important under the account settings is that a student can move his or her portfolio between schools. So let's say the student has moved from high school A and is now at high school B. If the student remembers his or her portfolio username and password, they can actually log in, navigate over to this page, and enter the new school's access username and password. So remember, that is the main username and password for that site that is available to the principal, the site coordinator, and any person who has an interest in career development at that site. So the site administrator has the opportunity to share that username and password at their discretion. But if the student is moving his or her portfolio, they would need that school username and password to transfer to the new school. All right, I am going to click on Cancel. And I'm going to click on my logo in the far left-hand corner. And to show you some more navigational components, you'll also see at the top next to Cindy's name that it has a messaging center. So she has 4 messages that are unread. And within this particular component, your students actually have a messaging board where he or she can see information that they have received. So at the top of the screen, your students can click on the messaging and see closed envelopes for messages that have not been read. They will have an open envelope for messages that have been read, and your students will also have an opportunity to delete messages. This messaging board is internal, and it allows communication between the student, the site coordinator, as well as a parent if he or she has an account, as well as a visitor if he or she has logged into this particular paradigm. All right, and your students can also see messages that he or she may have sent. And lastly, we can click on Send New Message, and the student, if he or she has an email address, can elect to send that. Next, your student can figure out who they want to send that to. So you'll have a series of options. You can send it to a staff account holder. You can send it to a visitor. And remember, we just implemented a visitor. We can send it to the site coordinator/administrator. Or if mom, dad, and guardian had an account, you'd be able to send a message to that person as well. Next, you will have an opportunity to implement a subject. you would enter the body of the message. And I'm going to select my person to whom should receive it, click send, and now you will see the message for September 8th. All right. Going back to that far upper right-hand corner, the last button that you have at that top would be log out. So anytime you are finished with your exploration and you want to close out your system, you would click on log out and that would end your session. I am now going to click on the house on the far left-hand corner, and that will take me back to the home page. And so I want to show you some of the navigational components that your students will become very familiar with as they are meeting their milestones. So at the very top, you'll notice that there are 6 areas in which your students can explore. They can explore through plan, assessments, occupations, education, employment, and my portfolio. And each one of these areas would actually show your students different access points that would help with their navigation. And so you'll notice that under each one of these areas, you have a series of questions that kind of prompt your students as to what information is available within the system. So for instance, I have what can I study? If I wanted to find out the components that would help me to answer that ultimate question, I have what is called Learn About Programs of Study. I can look at any specific program of study, or I can look at individual profiles. The last element on that top toolbar that is horizontal is what is called My Portfolio. The My Portfolio tab does not become active until you sign in as an individual student. And so when we cover each one of the milestones per grade level, we'll use this top-level navigation. Another way that you can navigate through the information on our system is via content areas. So your students may be looking at information that's just specific to getting started, learning about themselves, learning about work, learning about school, or learning about employment. And to find the resources in this system that would help them to accomplish those particular goals, the student can either click on the word View in each one of the areas, or they can click on the corresponding plus sign. So for the Getting Started elements, when I click on the plus sign, you'll see that it includes creating a portfolio, career plan, course planner individual graduation plan, and checklist. And to navigate to any one of those given structures, your students will click on the little corresponding element that turns from like a light gray to kind of a turquoise blue, and they can also click on the icon if they so desire. I'm going to close that back up by now clicking on the minus sign and making it a plus sign again, and so each one of these areas has a similar setup with activities that ultimately help that student accomplish that goal. All right. So now that we've kind of gotten our hands a little wet with the navigation of the entire system, let's take a look at those high school milestones for advisement. Again, as I alluded to earlier, your 9th grade students will save 3 additional occupations. And so to save occupations for GCIS, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate up to that top navigation, and we're going to click on the Occupations tab. And when we hover over Occupations, you'll see that there's a question that says, what can I learn about occupations? And the third element that is down is what is called occupations. Now, the reason why I say 3 additional occupations is that in the 8th grade, your students were assigned the task of saving 3 occupations. And you, as the ninth grade advisor, are to save 3 additional occupations. So in order to get full credit, your students will have to have a total of 6 occupations saved for that benchmark. So again, let me reiterate. To get full credit for that ninth grade requirement, your students will have to save 3 additional, which means that they need to have a total of 6. So again, to get there, I hovered over the Occupations tab. I'm going down to the Occupations link. And someone said, what about this year's ninth graders? They will have to, in order to get full credit, they will have to have 6 inside of the portfolio. Okay, that's a very good question. What if this is the first year that we're using GCIS? Well, the ninth graders have to have 6. If you are pulling your data specifically from GCIS, our reports require that you have 6. If you have documentation that you have 3 elsewhere, and you just want to do the 3 for this year for GCIS, when you enter that information into your SIS, then you will record whatever number that you can officially, for lack of a better term, to be able to officially verify. So if you're solely using GCIS and you do not have your documentation from last year, the only verifiable way that you can show that you have 6 is to complete the 6 within our system. Okay? And so that particular milestone was specific to, so for your SIS, so that's your Student Information System, so that is the official resource where you are sharing your information with the Department of Education. If you want to verify your information, again, you can look at your past records. I see someone asked about the 12th grade. And so I will definitely make sure that I stay a little bit after our session to make sure that I respond to all questions in your chat window. So keep the questions coming. I will make sure that I get back to all of you guys. So to save your first occupation inside of the system, what you will see is you'll see an alphabetical index at the top of your screen. And you can click on the first letter of any occupation that is of interest to you. So I'm going to go to N, and I'm going to click on Nurse Practitioners. And when I click on Nurse Practitioners, you'll see the name of the occupation will be duplicated at the top. And you have a series of topics located on your left-hand side in which you can explore further. So you start off with what is called At a Glance, and it tells you what nurse practitioners do. It gives you quick facts in terms of wages, employment, tenure growth, and number of annual openings. You have preparation, working conditions, wages, employment and outlook, and so forth. So again, this is just a quick at a glance. Next to each one of the areas, the preparation, work conditions, wages, and employment and outlook, you have a little conversation bubble. So if you wanted to know a little bit more information about what this entails, you can click on that little conversation bubble, and it'll tell you what exactly preparation includes. Some other elements that I want to highlight for you within this particular file, and please note that these topics are duplicated within every one of our occupations. So let's jump down to task lists. And so these show you different things that you would do. We're going to jump down to helpful high school courses. And so what we've done with our system is that we've actually earmarked the graduation requirements for the state of Georgia. And we've also named a couple of courses that would help to prepare that student to become a nurse practitioner. The next thing that you can do is you can look at wage data, because students always want to know how much does it pay, and that's a great question to ask. And so first thing you'll see is you'll actually see a chart of the wages. What I'd like to do is I'd like to transition this over to students who are more visual. So I'm going to click on View Numerical Version. And this will show you for nurse practitioners in the state of Georgia, as well as our major regions in the United States, they'll be able to see the starting wage, the median wage, as well as the top wages. And so they may want to look at this from an hourly perspective. So it default says annual. They can look at monthly. They can jump down to hourly. So hourly in the state of Georgia, the starting wage for a nurse practitioner is $37.47. So after your students go through this all-important information, your students will go up to the upper right-hand corner. They will click on Save. And your students will have an opportunity to comment on this particular occupation or what they have learned from this element. So they can elect to type something in, or they can elect to leave this area blank. And they will simply click on Save Information. And this will now become a part of that student's portfolio. Remember, I said my student has been in school for quite some time, so she has quite a few. So I'm going to drop down to where it says Nurse Practitioner. I left my comments blank, and I can actually see the date when I say that occupation. To demonstrate that again, I will go up to Occupations. I would go down to the Occupations link, which is the third element under What Can I Learn About Occupation. I will then have an opportunity to select another letter. I can look at all the topics related to a specific occupation. I would go to the upper right, click on Save. I would click Save Information, and now I have completed 2 of those elements. So again, if you're working solely with GCIS, your 9th graders will need to have 6. If you are working with another system, or you have previous documentation and you can provide official documentation, then you're only required to do the 3. I'm going to click on the house in the upper left-hand corner to take me back to the first page. And the element that we have earmarked for our 10th graders is that the benchmark that we are measuring is if that student has been introduced to the Move On When Ready dual enrollment umbrella. And so for this, we do not dictate how you introduce Move On When Ready. We allow you to decide how you make that information available to your student. And so some schools have elected to have a presentation. Some have elected to pass out a brochure. Some have elected to visit a specific school that has Move On When Ready opportunities within your community. We do not, again, dictate how you introduce that information. What we do suggest is that you keep a tally of who has received what information, because you can still report that information via the Georgia Career Information Systems Administration tools. So again, we do not dictate how you implement Move On When Ready at your school. We let you decide that category. If you'd like to see some Move On When Ready resources that we do have on our page, you can actually see those from our very first page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and this is a really nifty resource for you as well. At the very bottom, you have a section called About Us, and the very first link is the GCIC Home. And so remember, this was where we first began our presentation this morning. If you go up to the Georgia's Bridge Act tab, again under the Help Yourself, all the way at the bottom, we have some resources that you can use to supplement your Move On When Ready conversations with your students. Okay? So I'm going to go back up to the top. I'm going to click on Home in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to go ahead and click where it says Click Here to Enter. And because I never signed out, it takes me right back into my portfolio. For the 11th graders, the element that we are looking at specifically when it comes to career exploration for your advisement milestones is that your 11th graders have an opportunity to save 3 post-secondary schools of interest to them. And to locate that information, I'm going to go to the Education tab, and there is a question called, well, where can I study? And we actually have 2 areas. We have Georgia schools and we have U.S. schools. So when I click on Georgia schools, the Georgia schools are actually organized into 3 categories. We have 4-year and graduate schools, 2-year and technical schools, vocational and career schools. If I just wanted to see an alphabetical index of all of the Georgia schools, you'll see that there's an option that is called Georgia Schools, and then there you have it. All of those schools under those 3 categories are listed here. So if I wanted to look specifically at Georgia State University, I can find out everything there is to know about every school in the state of Georgia. And similar to what we had an at-a-glance for the occupations, we have at-a-glance for the individual schools. So Georgia State is located in Atlanta. It's in an urban population. An urban setting, I should say. It has 25,000 undergraduates, 7,000 graduates. Admissions difficulty is moderate. In-state tuition, $7,900. Out-of-state tuition, $26,000. Yes, it is public. Application deadline is March 1st. And then your students can also see information about the general body. What is our mascot? Where is it located? You can see student body. Male versus females, full-time versus part-time. You can see how much does it cost to go there. You can look at financial aid, yes please, and we even have the name of a person in which you can contact. We have, very good question, how often is the information updated? We're actually getting ready to update our information in the very near future, and you'll see numbers for tuition for 15, 16. And I see that my colleague is sharing with you annually. What we can also do with the Georgia schools, since we are located here at a public university, we actually have the opportunity to go ahead and refresh it even more frequently than that. So we work heavily with the individual schools as well as the University System of Georgia. We work with Technical College System of Georgia and the independent schools of Georgia to update their data. All right, so we will make sure that you have that information available to you. And so after your students explore their occupations, explore their schools, they will have an opportunity to go to the top, click Save. And after you click Save, your students can elect to type something in, or they can leave it blank. They would click Save Information, and this now becomes a part of their post-secondary school. Now, if I have a student who wants to go to school out of state, we definitely welcome that opportunity. So if you go back over to Education, your students will click on U.S. schools, and your students will have an opportunity to look at schools in every state and U.S. territory. So if I decided I wanted to go to school in the Virgin Islands, cool with us, they have the University of the Virgin Islands, and I would have an opportunity to see all of the information as it relates to that school. Very similar to what we saw when we were looking at the Georgia schools. I would go over to the far right-hand side, and I will click on Save in the upper right-hand corner. And I have an opportunity to say something, or I can just go ahead and click on Save Information, and I would have to do that one more time to get credit, as our system does pull from both Georgia schools and U.S. schools. I am now going to click on the house to take us back to the home page, and now we're up to our 12th grade students. Now that you've received all of this wonderful information, what do you plan to do with it? So your students have an opportunity to tell us what their next steps are. So I'm going to go over to the far right-hand side, hover over My Portfolio, and I'm going to go down to What's My Plan After High School? Click on My Next Step, and I'll have an opportunity to select from 8 options what I plan to do going forward. And I would click Save Information, and the 12th grade milestone report is pulling from this top area. What are your education plans after high school? And I also have an opportunity to say something further. So you're planning to get a bachelor's and an associate's degree. Well, tell me a little bit more. Well, additionally, I plan to join the ROTC at Georgia State University. I can click Save Information, and this now becomes a part of my portfolio. And so I'm now going to click on Home, and I just wanted to share with you, I know that the milestones are only looking at specific areas. Please keep in mind that you have an opportunity to look at even more components to supplement your ongoing and annual advisement with your students. So for instance, when you're talking with your 9th graders about occupations, you may also want to talk to them about green jobs. They may also be interested in military occupations, and they also have an opportunity to compare occupations side by side. When you are speaking with your students about move on when ready, you have an opportunity to look at various programs of study that they might want to look into to supplement their dual enrollment opportunities. This is also true for your 11th graders. So instead of just looking at, I want to go to XYZ school, you may want to start off by looking at a program of study that interests you and find out which schools offer that program of study. Being at Georgia State University, we've had countless opportunities where students say, well, I want to go to Georgia State University. Great, we'd love to have you. What would you like to study? I want to become an anesthesiologist. Well, the medical program for anesthesiologists might be offered at a different school, so we want to make sure that our students have exactly the key characteristics that they need in order to make those informed decisions. And so you have a whole host of different areas that you can use to supplement that annual and ongoing advisement. Your students also have an opportunity to look at financial aid. So there is an assessment called Financial Aid Sort, where your students can enter various components that are important to them when it comes to selecting a financial aid title. And what will happen is that GCIC will go through and cherry pick options for students that meet their specific criteria. They may already know what they want, what type of financial aid they need. So there's actually a financial aid library and one specific to Georgia's scholarships. And with your 12th graders, they have the whole world is their gamut. They can look at planning. They can look at assessments. They can look at occupations and use all of that information to make that informed decision about what their next step is. And to show you a wrap-up report of that, I'm going to hover over what is called My Portfolio again, and I'm going to go down to an element called the Personal Learning Plan. And the Personal Learning Plan allows you to see the highlights of what that student has saved. It allows them to set goals and make future plans. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on Generate PDF. I'm going to open said PDF, and this is going to show me the highlights of my students' information. So I can see my student's first and last name. If the middle name was recorded, I'd see that. I can see my student's school. If the student happens to have an ID that was included, I'd see that. I can see my student's graduation year, and I'd be able to see the student's career plan. I would be able to see the student's education plan, and you'll see that these are pulled from various parts of that portfolio, so you'll have a little breadcrumb that tells you that the education plan is coming from the career plan, the make plans subsection, education plans, and what are your plans after high school. As I continue to scroll down, I can see assessment results that my students have completed, and if that student would have said something, I would have seen that information here as well. I can see the career clusters that the students have saved. I can see any of the occupations that that student has saved. So during the course of our webinar, we saved school counselors. Student said that he or she wanted to become a school counselor. If your student happens to have saved a pathway, I can see the name of that pathway. I can see the courses that were attached to that pathway, and I can see a total of the credits that that student has planned. If the student had any test scores, I could see that. They selected programs to study. Students said that they wanted to go to school in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I have that information. They had any volunteer information, post-secondary schools. So if you really think about it, this particular report helps you with all of the high school milestone advisement components. Everything is listed here. You have an opportunity to provide comments. So if you want to print this out as a tangible document that you repeatedly pull out to advise your students. So on today's date, you might have one comment. 6 months from now, you may want to revisit this so that you can pull it up and see what you've shared with the student and to also give them additional insight. There's also an opportunity for you to have the student to sign, parent or guardian to sign, and you as the advisor to also sign off on so that you can share that during that annual conference with you, the student, and the guardian. And I'm going to close that out. And I'm now going to click on Home. And that concludes our session for today. We had an opportunity to look at the overall navigation of the system, and we also had an opportunity to look at the high school advisement milestones within GCIS. I do want to share with you that this is a recorded session, so you will have an opportunity to access this at a later date and time. We will share with you when these are posted. In addition, we will post those web guides so that your students can walk through the individual elements as they navigate through the system. And just know that we're here to support you guys as you are implementing your components. Feel free to use that GCIS coordinator email freely, and we look forward to, if you want us to, make your portfolios. Feel free to send that information. If you want us to upload your courses, we can assist with that as well. So definitely keep that email address in the back of your mind, and I'm actually going to stop the recording.